I killed Marco. Not with my hands. I've told myself that for 2 years, but I put him in that tunnel. I made the call that took us past the point we should have turned around. And when that thing in the dark closed the distance, when the sound Marco was making stopped being Marco, that was on me, completely, irreversibly. 3 of us went down into the cave system beneath the Bolivian altiplano. One of us came back. I am the one who came back. What's left of me needs the weight distributed. So, from the beginning, all of it, the choice I made that cannot be unmade, and what came after. My name is not important. What is important? 11 years as a geophysical surveyor, contracts across South America, twice in Central Asia, a reputation for sound judgment under pressure, the kind that gets you called first when a project is complicated, when someone needs to make a call. That reputation should have died on the altiplano. I don't understand why it didn't. The project was a private mineral assessment. A company I won't name had acquired a concession block in the southwestern Bolivian altiplano, 4,000 meters above sea level, no trees, wind with no obstacles for 300 kilometers. Magnetometric data suggesting a lithological anomaly beneath the surface. Rare earth potential. My team was tasked with going in and verifying. 3 people. Me as lead surveyor. Marco, 26 years old, from Cochabamba, and 18 months into his career. Mine engineering background, methodical, equipment first. He kept a photo of his daughter in the chest pocket of his field jacket. Her name was Valentina. She was 3 years old. He showed me the photo on our second day at the site, just held it up briefly, said her name, put it away. The kind of thing a man does when he wants the people around him to know what he's working for. Renata, 41, La Paz, 20 years in field geology, mostly Andean systems. She spoke Quechua, which matters for this story. She was the reason we got cooperation from the local community near the site, and the reason we had any warning at all. On our second day, before descent preparation, Renata came back from the settlement with the access documentation and something else. She told me the community elders had asked her to pass something along. The caves beneath this section of the plateau are referred to as Ucupacha Entrada, the entrance to the inner world, not metaphor, designation, a specific place with specific properties. The elders' message, no one enters. The prohibition predated their grandparents' I said, every cave system in the Andes has a community prohibition, resource protection, sacred site designation. It doesn't tell us anything about what's actually down there. I used my own knowledge to dismiss what she was telling me, turned the information into evidence that it wasn't serious. Renata didn't argue. She wrote something in her field notebook. I saw her writing, didn't see what. Closed it, and moved on to equipment checks. Late that evening, I caught her looking at the coordinates on the topographic map. Not calculating, not annotating, just looking at a point the way you look at something you're not sure you should approach. I wrote community access. Cosmological designation noted, no operational constraint, in my project log, and went to sleep. We went in the next morning. I made that call. Both of them would have supported a decision to delay. I know this because I know who they were, but I set the timeline, and the timeline was driven by a client who had a deadline. A deadline. 4,000 meters up, beneath the oldest prohibition either of us had encountered in 30 years of field work. We entered at 6:58 on a Thursday morning. The wind had dropped overnight, which was unusual. The altiplano without wind has a quality of attention. Like the landscape is listening. I noted calm conditions, optimal entry window in my field log. I did not note the listening quality. The entrance was a collapse feature, elliptical, maybe 3 meters at its widest, partially concealed by a berm of wind-blown sediment. Easy to miss. We'd found it through remote sensing. The community knew exactly where it was. They had simply not done anything about knowing except stay away from it. 14 meters to a wide ledge, then 18 more to the primary chamber floor. Marco first, then Renata, then me, pulling the equipment sacks behind me. The primary chamber was large, 50 meters across, angular tectonic geometry. Ceiling our lights couldn't reach. The air was dry cold. Old cold. The kind that implies undisturbed air over a very long time. Marco ran the atmospheric check. CO2, acceptable. No methane, no sulfide, oxygen adequate, thumbs up. The first thing I should have registered as wrong, I didn't. It was completely silent, not quiet, silent. I have been underground on 4 continents. There is always a baseline. Water, settling rock, cave fauna, bats, the microacoustic texture of a living system. This chamber had none of it. Our voices and equipment were the only sound in a space large enough to seat 200 people. The silence pressed against the ears. The way you notice when something that was previously there is no longer there. The magnetometer readings were extraordinary. The anomaly was larger than our remote data had suggested. Extensive, deep, all structurally complex. Exactly what the client had paid for. Renata found the passage, northwest quadrant, natural, not tectonic, going deeper. She came back to where I was standing and said, quietly, "It goes deeper, far enough that I can't see the end of it." I looked at the magnetometer. The anomaly signature was strongest in the northwest quadrant. I said, "We go in." Renata said, "I want to note for the record that I have a concern about proceeding without surface contact confirmation." I said, "Noted," and began packing the equipment for transit. For the record, she knew objecting directly wouldn't change my decision. She was creating documentation, protecting herself from what she had already calculated was coming. I read it as caution, the kind of thing you note and proceed through. The passage was tight, single file, low ceiling, fractured ignimbrite floor that caught boots at odd angles. Marco first, atmospheric monitor running. Renata second. Me last, magnetometer on a short tether. 70 meters before it opened into a second chamber. The second chamber stopped us all. Not because of what it contained, because of what had happened to it. Stalactite formations that should have hung vertically were horizontal, sheared from their roots and displaced across the floor. The walls showed compression marks. Long parallel striations inconsistent with any tectonic process I could identify. Not seismic fracture lines, something else. Force applied from inside the chamber, pressure from within, repeated, directional, purposeful. Renata moved to the center and turned slowly, the expression of someone reading a language they half know. She said, "Something moved through here. Something that used this chamber as a corridor." I said, "Seismic event. The altiplano has significant historical." She said, "Not seismic. The compression pattern is too localized, too directional. Seismic moves everything. This moved specific things. And look at the regrowth on the formation stumps. These didn't break recently, but they didn't break in geological time either. Whatever this was, It was within human history. Within human history, in a cave system beneath a prohibition old enough that no one could date its origin. I said, "Can you quantify?" She said, "Decades, maybe a century, not more." Marco said nothing. He was looking at the far wall where a second passage opened, larger, tall enough to walk upright. Looking at it the way you look at something you've already decided you don't want to enter but haven't said yet. I said, "We continue." Neither of them said anything. Marco picked up the atmospheric monitor. Renata picked up her sample kit. We continued. The passage between the second and third chambers was 110 meters, almost perfectly straight, a near impossible geometry for a natural cave system. Natural passages meander. They follow the path of least resistance. They do not run straight for the length of a football pitch. That passage was made, not by human hands, but made. Something had created that geometry deliberately. And the straightness of it had a purposefulness I felt physically, a persistent wrongness in my chest that I was attributing to altitude and was not altitude. The third chamber was enormous, 80 meters across, possibly more. Our combined headlamps couldn't reach the far wall. The ceiling was lost in darkness above us. Marco found it first. He was 15 meters ahead of us when he stopped. His headlamp fixed on something at the floor. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He stood completely still in the way that experienced field people stand still when they've encountered something they're not immediately sure how to categorize. On the floor of the chamber, approximately 20 meters in, was an arrangement. Not bones. That was my first thought, but not bones. Stones. Flat, worked stones, each the size of a hand, placed in a precise radial pattern. A circle perhaps 2.5 meters in diameter. Stones laid in lines pointing outward for a central point. Like compass bearings, like a diagram of direction. Each line equidistant from the next. I counted the lines. 13. Older than anything pre-Columbian I'd seen in the region. The working technique different, more fundamental, placed with a precision that implied either extraordinary care or a tool I couldn't identify from the evidence. Renata knelt beside it for a long time, touched nothing, looked at the central stone, unmarked, flat, larger than the others, then looked up at me and said, "We need to leave this chamber." I said, "It's a historical site, archaeological. That we document it," and she said, "We need to leave this chamber right now." Her voice was flat, not frightened, past frightened. The way an experienced person sounds when the risk assessment had come out bad and there was no time left for processing. I was already forming the argument, the data, the formation anomaly, the client's timeline, when the sound arrived. From the far side of the chamber, for the darkness our lights couldn't reach. 3 pulses, low, sustained, separated by exactly equal intervals. A gap. 3 more pulses, deliberate, patterned. The product of something that breathed. Marco's hand went to his atmospheric monitor. The readings hadn't changed. Whatever was in that chamber with us wasn't metabolizing in any way the monitor could detect. I said very quietly, "Don't move your lights toward it." I don't fully know why I said that. Some processing happening faster than conscious thought. A deeper part of me completing an assessment my forebrain hadn't finished. Both of them held their lamps still. The sound stopped. 30 seconds of the most complete silence I have ever experienced. I could hear my own pulse. I could hear Renata breathing next to me. I could hear nothing else. Then movement, acoustic movement, something large moving in a large stone space, changing the quality of the air, the direction of echo. Something in the darkness at the far end of the chamber, moving in a circle, a long, slow arc around the outer edge of our combined light radius. Assessing us, not attacking, not retreating, assessing, moving around our light the way an intelligent animal moves around an unknown stimulus before committing to a response. I said, barely above a whisper, back to the passage. Controlled pace, no sudden movements, lights forward. Predators that hunt by sound respond to behavior, not presence. A thing in your territory is not prey. A thing that runs is prey. If you can deny the behavior, move slowly without the rhythms of panic, you can sometimes pass through without triggering the response. Sometimes. We moved, single file, slow. Renita ahead of me. Marco first, closest to the passage. I walked backward, facing the chamber, almost watching. The circling sound had stopped. I couldn't locate it acoustically anymore. That was worse. When I could hear it, I knew where it was. The silence told me nothing. We were 10 meters from the passage entrance when Renata's boot dislodged a fragment of ignimbrite. It skittered sideways. The sound lasted less than a second. It was enough. The thing moved. I'm not going to tell you what I saw. I'm going to tell you what I registered, because what I saw and the categories available for processing it did not align. It was large. Larger than the context suggested. The chamber was enormous, and it still occupied a significant portion of my visual field. It moved with more contact points on the floor than the movement required. And the darkness moved with it, not metaphorically. The boundary between lit and dark space behaved differently in its vicinity than anywhere else in the chamber. It crossed half the chamber in the time it took me to register it had moved. Then it stopped. At the edge of our light, in the precise band where illumination became darkness, and it was still. Nobody breathed. Marco had made it to the passage entrance, standing at the threshold, perfectly still, looking back at us. His face had processed something it was not going to be able to unprocess. The thing made the sound again, not the 3-pulse rhythm, something lower, sustained. A single held note that resonated in the chest cavity in a way that sound at that volume should not have been able to. Though like it was producing the sound from somewhere below the register of ordinary biological sound production. I made a decision, 3 seconds. I have been living in those 3 seconds for 2 years. I said, when I say go, you run. Both of you. Straight to the passage. Straight through the second chamber. Straight back to the primary. Do not stop. I will be right behind you. I will be right behind you. That sentence. It sounds like sacrifice. It sounds like leadership. It is neither. It is the sentence of a man whose survival instincts had already calculated the geometry and produced words that sounded like selflessness and meant something else entirely. If I were truly placing myself between them and the threat, I would have gone last. I did not go last. I said, go. We ran, all 3 of us, into the passage. And the sound behind us was immediate. It had moved before my last syllable. The passage was 110 meters, and the passage was all we had. Running that passage at speed was different from walking it. Every pressure ridge a genuine hazard, a bend at the 40-meter mark that Marco hit at full pace. I heard it by the sound of his shoulder against the wall. He didn't slow down. The sound behind me was not receding, not falling behind, keeping pace, 10 meters back, constant, unvarying. It was not running at its limit. It was keeping a specific distance, not closing, not retreating, maintaining. It was hurting us. I kept running. Renata cleared the passage into the second chamber ahead of me. I heard her footsteps change register, passage acoustics to chamber acoustics. And then I was through, and I turned. The thing had stopped at the passage entrance. I could see it, partially, in the combined light of 3 headlamps from different angles. It filled the entrance, it occupied the threshold, and it did not cross it. 30 seconds. None of us moved. It simply occupied the entrance the way a very large, very patient thing occupies a space, without urgency, without any signal that it expected this situation to be different. Renata said, not looking away, the disrupted formations, the compression marks. It moved through this chamber, repeatedly, but something made it stop. Oh, and the formations have been regrowing around the damage since. I said, how long will it hold at the threshold? She said, I don't know. Move. We moved. Through the second chamber, into the first passage, 70 meters back to the primary chamber, fast without running. We were 50 meters in when we heard it enter the second chamber. We cleared into the primary chamber at 11:14. The ascent ropes were in place, 14 meters up the first rope to the ledge, then 18 to the surface. We had time. This is the part I have to tell with complete accuracy, because I have spent 2 years constructing softer versions of what happened in the next 4 minutes, and every softer version is a lie. Yes, and I am done with the lies. I went to the rope, not Renata first, not Marco first, me. I moved to the base of the first ascent rope and began rigging my harness before I said a word about the order. Some part of me had already made a decision that another part hadn't yet approved. Marco saw it immediately. He said, "The order," and stopped, looked at me, not with anger, not with accusation, with something quieter and worse. The expression of a person who has understood a situation fully and is deciding in real time what to do with the understanding. He was quiet for 1 second. Then he said, "Renata goes first." Renata goes first. This 26-year-old man, his daughter's photo in the chest pocket of his jacket, and 18 months of a career he'd worked to build. He understood what I was doing, and he said Renata goes first, which put Renata safe, me second, and him last. He said it like it was his idea. He gave me the cover of his generosity when I had not earned it and did not deserve it. I stepped back from the rope. Renata clipped in. She went up. She was 7 meters up when the sound arrived. Not from the passage we'd come through. The sound came from the floor. From directly beneath us. 3 slow pulses, a gap, 3 slow pulses, rising through the ignimbrite floor, conducted through the rock itself, felt in the soles of the boots before it was heard by the ears. There is no passage to the primary chamber except the one we'd used, no second entrance. We had surveyed this chamber on entry. The walls are solid tectonic rock. The ceiling is unbroken. Marco's atmospheric monitor began alarming. Pressure differential. Something below us pressing upward against the floor. Renata shouted from 8 meters up, "Go! Both of you! Now!" I looked at the rope. I looked at Marco. The floor was moving, a subtle rhythmic flex. The ignimbrite substrate rising and falling by millimeters, the compression wave of something enormous pushing from depth. I moved to the rope. I tell you this without mitigation. I moved to the rope. I clipped in. I started climbing. And all the justifications I constructed in the next 4 seconds, I needed to be at the ledge. A lead surveyor at the top is more useful. All of that was justification for a thing I had already done before the justification was constructed. I was 4 meters up when the floor fractured, circular, 2 meters in diameter, the ignimbrite splitting along radial lines, 13 of them. I counted from 4 meters up a rope. I counted because my brain was performing some terrible parallel. 13 radial lines, exactly like the stone arrangement in the third chamber. Marco ran for the rope. The thing came through the floor. I watched it. I made myself watch it, because looking away felt like an additional betrayal. And because if I didn't witness this, then Marco's last moments would exist only for the thing that ended them. So I watched. And what I watched is mine to carry. I'm not going to describe it. Not because I can't find language. I've found language for everything else. Because the description would make it smaller than it was. So he ran, and it came through the floor, and the sound he made had his whole life in it, and then it didn't. And then there was silence. I climbed. Renata was at the ledge, and she pulled. My arms gave out at 12 meters, and she pulled, and I came over the edge, and we went up the second rope, and over the rim of the entrance shaft, and onto the surface of the altiplano. And the sky was enormous and white, and the wind had come back. Renata was already on the satellite communicator. Her voice was controlled, and her hands were not. I sat on the cold ground and looked at the entrance shaft, and from somewhere below, from below the ropes, from below the primary chamber, from whatever was down there in the dark. 3 slow pulses. A gap. 3 slow pulses. Then the wind, and nothing else. The official investigation found no remains. A Bolivian government emergency team descended 5 days later. They documented the fracture in the floor. Subsidence consistent with void collapse, the report says. They documented that the fracture had been refilled, pressed back together from below. They documented the absence of the passage to the secondary chambers. The 70-meter passage was gone, completely closed, indistinguishable from solid wall. No seismic event was recorded by any station in the region on the day of the incident or the 4 days following. The company closed the concession 6 months later. Unfavorable preliminary survey results. The concession block is currently inactive. I checked last month. The community is still there. The prohibition is still in place. Marco's daughter, Valentina, is 5 years old now. She will grow up knowing her father died in a site accident. That is all she will know, because it is all that can be officially confirmed. It is barely something I can give to myself. Renata. Buffed. We had 2 official contacts after the incident, then 7 weeks of silence. Then she called from a number I didn't recognize. She didn't want the call traceable. She had returned to the community, on her own time, to speak with the elders directly. The elder didn't react to the information about Marco with surprise. He received it the way old people sometimes receive bad news, as confirmation of something already understood, not coldly, but without shock. He told her the Quechua name for what is in the cave is not a name, but a description. It translates approximately as the one that knows the shape of the space between things. He said the community's relationship with it has always been based on a single principle. Do not remind it that you exist. The prohibition isn't about protecting the cave. It is about not drawing its attention, maintaining over generations a collective invisibility. The elder asked one question. Which one of you was last? She told him it was Marco, 26 years old, last at the rope. The elder said, then it did not choose randomly. It took the one who was exposed, the one the others had left at the boundary. He was last because I went first. He was exposed because I exposed him. Whatever is in that cave found the gap in our formation, and it took the person standing in the gap. I asked Renata, is there anything the elder said we should do? She said, do not go back. The thing in the cave has no history of sparing people who return after surviving contact. We are known to it now. Our particular presence, our weight, our shape, whatever it registers, is registered. Going near that place again would be noticed. I asked, does it leave the cave? The elder didn't answer that question. He asked her not to ask it again. She hung up. I haven't spoken to her since. Her professional registration is current. She is alive and working somewhere. I hope the somewhere is far from the altiplano and far from anything below the surface. There are 4 things I cannot resolve. The first, the stone arrangement, 13 radial lines on the floor of the 3rd chamber, made with worked stones by hands that were not recent and were not the community's. The community doesn't enter the cave. Someone else made that arrangement, and the fracture pattern in the primary chamber floor matched it exactly. 13 radial lines, same proportions, same central point. I counted them at 4 meters up a rope. I have been noticing it every day since. The second, the phrase the elder used, the one that knows the shape of the space between things. Not a name, a description of what it perceives, the gaps, the intervals, the exposed positions, the person standing last at the rope base while the others are already climbing. It perceives gaps. It operates through gaps. The stone arrangement isn't a map of territory. It's a map of perception. 13 directions. 13 ways of measuring the space between. The third, my field log. I have it. On the page recording our entry, 658, my handwriting, my pen, in the lower margin, in marks that are not my handwriting and not any handwriting I recognize, are 3 horizontal lines, evenly spaced, deliberate. The log was in my equipment pack from the moment we entered to the moment I crested the entrance shaft. No one else handled it. 3 lines, not the 3 pulse sound. That was temporal. These are spatial, marks on a page. Whatever made them was in close proximity to me for the entire duration of our survey. I only discovered them afterward. The 4th thing, the one at the bottom. Marco showed me Valentina's photo on our 2nd day at the site, held it up, and said her name, put it away, just information he wanted the people around him to have. On the morning of the descent, he checked his equipment twice. Then he checked mine, ran a hand along my harness anchor point, gave it a small tug, nodded. He didn't ask. He just checked. The kind of person who checks the person next to him without being asked. He trusted me, right up to the rope base. And even when he understood what I was doing, even in that moment, he didn't withdraw the trust. He redirected it. He covered for me. He said Renata goes first and took the position my behavior had created for him, without making me confront what I was doing. I don't know whether he did that because he hadn't fully processed the danger, or because he had and was making a choice, or because he was simply the kind of person who protects the people around him by reflex, even in extremis. Any of those possibilities is harder to live with than the last. I don't know how to end this because I'm not sure the situation has ended. The concession is inactive, not closed. The cave system is still there. The entrance is still open. I checked the satellite imagery 3 months ago. The prohibition is still in place, and I believe now, in a way I did not believe before I went underground, that it is the only thing keeping the local population safe. Do not remind it that you exist. I have reminded it. It has 3 marks in my field log. It knows my presence, whatever information it accumulates about living things that enter the space between its awareness. I don't know if that information decays. I don't know if distance is meaningful to something that perceives by gap and interval. I sleep with the lights on. I have slept with the lights on for 2 years. I don't know if light means anything to something that moved through a sealed rock floor. What I know is that Marco is gone, and I am here, and the distance between those 2 facts is a gap, a specific, shaped, measured gap. And I don't have language for what that means to something that knows the shape of the space between things. 2 years. And in the early hours when the mind loses its grip on the managed version. 3 slow pulses, a gap, and I'm still waiting for the 4th. There are 3 explanations for what we encountered on the altiplano. I believe one of them. I won't tell you which, because the one I believe means this isn't finished, and naming it out loud feels like the kind of announcement that gets answered. I left one detail out deliberately. What I saw at 5 meters up that rope, in the half-second before I made myself look away. I've never described it. If you've been in a cave system, anywhere in the Andes, anywhere in high-altitude karst country, and something happened that you haven't been able to put into language, tell me in the comments. Not the details, just, yes, just, I know the shape. And if you know what 13 means, in this context, in this part of the world, to something that measures the space between things, I want to know. Drop it below. Don't explain it, just the number, just 13. See if anyone else knows. Now you're carrying it too.